The story opens in a large apartment complex in New York. Ms. Daigle is returning to her place when she suddenly feels as if someone is nearby. She ignores the feeling and reaches for her door, but the building manager, Mr. Johnson, walks up and tells her the master keys have gone missing, so all the locks will be changed tomorrow. He also asks if she has thought about moving to a cheaper unit, but she clearly refuses. Even though her apartment is expensive, she wants to stay. Mr. Johnson leaves soon after. Inside, we learn she lives with her disabled brother, Brad. He wasn't always like this. Something in the past changed his condition. She takes care of him, tries to give him food, but he isn't hungry. She leaves music playing and goes to another room to grade papers. Suddenly, she hears Brad calling. When she checks on him, he looks terrified. She comforts him. He saw something, a shadow. Later, while she is working again, she notices on the monitor that a human-shaped shadow moves inside Brad's room. She rushes back and finds Brad still scared. Then she notices something shocking in his hand: the missing master keys. She asks him where he got them, but Brad only keeps begging her to leave the apartment. Lights go out as Ms. Daigle leaves the room, and someone drags her in the dark, injuring her leg with a pencil. She cries for help, but no one hears her. Then she sees Brad, already harmed, and hides under the bed in shock. The intruder stays inside, attacks her again when she reaches for the keys, injuring her hand and eyes, and ends her life. We still don't know if the attacker is human or something supernatural. A few days later, the scene shifts to New York City, where we meet Phil Lodge and his two daughters, 7-year-old Rose and 14-year-old Violet. Phil once worked in the police force, but after his wife passed away, he quit so he could focus entirely on raising his girls. He wanted a job that kept him close to them, and the superintendent position in this building had just opened, so he came to apply. Violet has a rude, stubborn temperament and often stays upset with her father, a reason that will be revealed later. Phil tells his daughters to wait in the hallway while he meets Mr. Johnson. After asking a few questions and checking Phil's clean record, Mr. Johnson hires him immediately. Mr. Johnson shows Phil around the building, explains the rules, but keeps the mechanical room locked and hidden. In the basement, he mentions Walter, the senior superintendent, an odd man involved in strange spiritual, voodoo-like practices. He also shows Phil the furnace and a small lower-level apartment where Phil and his daughters will have to live. Phil agrees. Meanwhile, Rose wanders downstairs and meets Walter, played by the late Val Kilmer. Rose felt slightly uneasy after hearing what he said. When Phil returns, both daughters are gone. Beverly, a resident, says she saw a teenage girl on the stairs. Violet had met a boy named Vondel who was smoking, and she joined him. Phil arrives, throws her cigarette away, and asks about Rose. Rose is downstairs, wanting a ball like Vondel's. Beverly checks again if everything is okay. Rose quietly tells Phil she doesn't like this place and says their mother wouldn't like it either. Phil tells her she will adjust. The scene shifts to Walter chanting strange rituals. Then we see Mrs. Gray, an elderly resident, experiencing odd events. Her TV turning on by itself, a presence in her home, her knife disappearing. Finally, someone attacks her and ends her life. Phil and his family settle in. Rose keeps staring at their door, and Phil realizes Walter was on the other side trying to open it. Walter apologizes, thinking the room was empty. Phil tells him they live here now and mentions his new job. Walter gives Rose a strange look and leaves, making Phil uneasy. The next day, Phil meets Julio, another employee. Someone left furniture behind, so Julio helps Phil move it into his apartment. He greets Violet, but she ignores him. That night, Phil wakes to find the door open and Rose gone. He sees a figure in the hallway that instantly vanishes. He finally finds Rose in the basement near the furnace, quietly watching the flames. The next morning, Walter asks about Rose, saying she seems lonely. Phil asks how he knows her name, and Walter claims she told him. He quickly shifts to talking about maintenance, raising Phil's suspicion. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson sends an employee to check Ms. Gray's apartment because her dog won't stop barking. Phil joins him. Mrs. Gray is missing, and only the dog remains, so Phil brings it back, which Rose loves. Phil also brings Rose a bed, upsetting Violet, who feels ignored. She storms out, goes to the laundry room, and talks with Beverly, who treats her kindly. At the same time, Vondel is at home when someone knocks. He answers the door, and someone attacks him, making him disappear like the others. Beverly hears odd noises and feels something is off, but Violet has already left, so she ignores it. The next day, while Phil and Julio work outside, police arrive and say Vondel has been missing since yesterday, and his mother is distressed. Phil worries for his daughters, and, already doubtful of Walter, tries talking to Violet. She takes it hard, starts crying, and deletes a photo of Vondel. Rose later meets Walter again. Wearing a locket, he talks strangely about a man who escaped people, lived in caves, and discovered something powerful. His words scare Rose, and she walks away. Walter follows until Phil steps in, blocks him, and warns him to stay away. Walter only stares back. That night, Phil dreams of Vondel injured. When he wakes, Rose is there, happily describing a dream where she saw her mother. Violet overhears and becomes sad. The next day, while cleaning, Phil grows suspicious and tries opening the mechanical room. Mr. Johnson appears instantly, angry, telling him to do his job and stay out. Phil apologizes. The next day, they go to Julio's birthday party. While they're out, Walter enters their apartment, searches around, takes a brush, and pours a strange mixture he made onto Rose's bed. But Phil and the girls return early, forcing Walter to hide. Rose approaches her bed and instantly senses something off. The mixture's smell makes her collapse from weakness. Phil panics, finds the bed wet with leaves on it, quickly replaces everything, and cleans up. He's sure Walter did this since he had tried entering their apartment before. The following day, Phil confronts Walter and threatens him to stay away. Beverly steps in, calms Phil, and takes him for coffee. While talking, a flower pot in her room suddenly breaks on its own. Beverly is confused, and Phil becomes uneasy, telling her to lock her room well before leaving. Moments later, Beverly hears strange music, her timer starts by itself, and someone knocks. She checks the peephole and sees two shadows, one shaped like a small girl. Everything goes dark, and she screams. The scene shifts to Phil and Julio cleaning an apartment for new tenants. Mr. Johnson arrives with visitors. Phil realizes this is Mrs. Daigle's apartment, the same teacher who taught Rose and had told Phil about this job. Phil asks why Ms. Daigle left, and Julio says she probably had a family emergency. No one knows she actually passed away. Then they notice shoe prints on the floor, clear blood marks. Shocked, they show them to Mr. Johnson, but he quietly wipes them away. It's obvious he knows what happened, but doesn't want the building's reputation damaged. Phil now suspects Johnson is hiding something, especially in the mechanical room. So Phil and Julio finally decide to check it. Inside, they only discover Johnson's secret. He watches women shower through a small hole. He isn't a killer, just someone with twisted habits. Meanwhile, Violet is in the elevator when it suddenly stops, then drops her straight to the basement. When she steps out, the lift closes behind her. The darkness feels wrong, and that's when Walter appears, telling her she must listen to him. Terrified, Violet runs as Walter follows, chanting. She escapes in time and runs straight into Phil, shaking with fear. She hugs him, then snaps, saying all of this is happening because of him, and if their mother were alive, they wouldn't be trapped here. Phil realizes Walter has crossed another line and decides to stop him. He goes to Mrs. Gray's apartment, breaks part of her cane, and plans to frame Walter for her disappearance. Julio disagrees, but Phil insists. Mrs. Gray didn't vanish by accident, and neither did Vondel. He believes Walter is behind it all. Phil then enters Walter's room and finds many bags and shoes belonging to young girls, along with other disturbing items. He also finds Rose's hairbrush. That confirms Walter's intentions are dangerous. Phil is about to leave when Walter returns, but Julio distracts him with a task, giving Phil the chance to slip out safely. Phil makes an anonymous call, and police search Walter's room and arrest him, giving Phil brief relief. That night, Phil and Beverly walk on the terrace. She tells him how her mother's affair caused her parents' divorce and how bitterness shaped her childhood, the same way Violet behaves now. Phil admits Violet resents him because he couldn't save his wife in the house fire. He managed to save Rose and himself, but failed to reach her mother. Beverly comforts him, saying he's a good father, and the two begin to grow closer. Later, a noise wakes Phil. He checks outside, sees no one, then someone grabs his leg. He escapes, turns, and Walter attacks. But Phil wakes up. It was only a nightmare. The real shock comes when police release Walter for lack of evidence. Somehow he erased anything linking him to the crimes. Phil now knows Walter understands exactly who reported him. Phil becomes tense, constantly watching his daughters. One day, he goes to fix a lock and leaves them with Julio, who slips away with a female employee. Meanwhile, Walter approaches Phil's apartment. Phil returns, senses something wrong, and rushes in to find Rose gone. He and Violet search the basement and find Rose again, standing near the furnace. At the same time, Julio checks Phil's apartment and finds Vondel's ball beside the dog and a dollhouse with 4 dolls representing Phil's family. 2 of them burned, a meaning we understand later. Julio is shocked by what he finds. Meanwhile, Walter stands near the furnace. Phil demands to know where Rose is, but Walter talks strangely about spirits and sending a bad soul back. Enraged, Phil attacks him, shouting for Rose's location. He beats Walter until he collapses unconscious. Violet witnesses everything and, upset, walks away to Beverly. Phil thinks he has accidentally killed Walter and panics. Then Rose appears and explains she heard Walter talking, so she hid. Seeing her calms Phil. He calls Julio and says he made a terrible mistake. When Julio arrives, Phil takes him to Walter's body. But Walter has vanished. Phil cannot understand how. Julio then shows Phil Vondel's ball he found in Phil's apartment, shocking him. At that moment, Rose appears and claims the ball is hers. Julio looks at her strangely and says he has never seen her before. Rose replies that people only see her when their time comes. She then rolls the 3rd ball into the hole, winning the game. Suddenly, Phil takes a cutter and ends Julio's life. The story now shifts completely. Phil and his family are not the victims, they are the danger. Phil mourns Julio, saying he was his friend. Rose calmly tells him Julio had to be removed because he suspected them and would have taken Phil away from her. Soon after, Mr. Johnson arrives, angry after receiving some information. He had tried checking Phil's background based on Walter's hint and learned Phil was never a police officer. He lied on his resume. But when he confronts Phil, he finds him pushing Julio's body into the furnace. Johnson is horrified when he sees Phil pushing Julio's body into the furnace. He runs to save himself, but Phil chases him. The truth becomes clear when Violet tells Beverly everything. 7 years ago, during the fire, not only their mother died, Rose died too. Rose is not human anymore, but a spirit, and a dangerous one. Violet explains Rose was her twin. Beverly is confused since she has never seen Rose, but Violet says only certain people can: Phil, Walter, and soon Beverly. The meaning is simple and terrifying. Whoever starts seeing Rose is close to death, because Rose uses Phil to end their lives by controlling his mind. Meanwhile, Phil catches Johnson and, on Rose's command, ends him. Rose suddenly senses trouble and angrily tells Phil that Violet is exposing their secret. Violet continues explaining, Rose hates her and takes anything she cares about: Ms. Daigle, Vondel, even Mrs. Gray, likely to get her dog. Rose is behind every murder, using Phil as her weapon. Violet has always feared her and blamed her father for following Rose's influence. Then, Violet reveals the worst truth. Rose caused the fire that killed their mother. She was angry, and her powers turned destructive. Phil discovered this and ended Rose's life back then. Since that moment, Rose's spirit attached itself to him, a curse he can never escape. Right then, Rose appears, and this time, Beverly can see her too. Realizing the danger, Violet tells Beverly they must run. They rush into the elevator, and Violet apologizes because she knows what is about to happen. When the doors open, Phil is waiting. Violet steps in front of Beverly, telling her to run. They head toward the basement, but Walter appears from behind and strikes Phil on the head, knocking him out. He throws something at Rose too, causing her to fall. And now Violet can see her as well. Walter draws a circle and starts a ritual. It becomes clear he truly knows these practices and can see spirits. Since the day he first saw Rose, he had decided to send her back to the other world. He begins chanting. Beverly doesn't understand and thinks Walter is wrong. Violet tries to stop her, insisting Walter is helping them escape Rose. Rose screams in pain, calling out to Phil, but he is too weak to help. Rose's form begins to burn. Before Walter can finish the ritual, Beverly hits him on the head with a metal rod. The spell breaks, and Phil quickly grabs Rose. Enraged, he attacks Walter with a knife. Walter tries to explain he was trying to save them, but Phil drives the knife into his chest, ending his life. Phil then turns toward Beverly to finish her too, but Rose stops him, saying she needs a mother. She has forgiven Beverly. The four of them come out of the basement. Beverly is terrified and asks Phil what she must do. Phil tells her she only has to follow whatever Rose says if she wants to stay alive. Everything will be fine. Phil asks Rose if it's over. Rose replies, "No, this is only the beginning." And with that, the family walks out of the building together, and the film ends.